Oil, one of humanity's most valuable resources, yet also one of the greatest environmental threats when unleashed into the ocean. Every year, millions of liters spill into the sea, devastating marine life, poisoning ecosystems, and leaving scars that last for decades. Today, we're diving into history's most catastrophic oil spills, disasters so massive that they were caught on camera, serving as haunting reminders of the cost of human error and industrial risks. Stay with us as we count down the 10 most shocking oil spills ever recorded. On April 20th, 2010, the Deepwater Horizon oil rig, operated by BP, exploded off the coast of the Gulf of Mexico due to a well integrity failure and a series of safety oversights. A surge of highly pressurized gas shot up the drilling pipe, igniting a massive fireball that engulfed the platform. The catastrophic blowout triggered an uncontrollable oil spill, releasing 780 million liters of crude oil into the ocean over 87 agonizing days. Cameras captured haunting images of towering flames, an oil slick stretching for hundreds of kilometers, and marine life struggling in the toxic waters. The spill devastated entire ecosystems, killing thousands of marine animals and contaminating shorelines across multiple states. Fishing industries collapsed, coastal communities suffered immense economic losses, and the long-term environmental damage persisted for years. To this day, it remains one of the worst ecological disasters in human history, a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of negligence in deep-sea drilling. On March 24, 1989, the Exxon Valdez oil tanker struck the Bligh Reef off the coast of Alaska, rupturing its hull and spilling 41 million liters of crude oil into the pristine waters of Prince William Sound. The disaster was caused by a combination of human error, inadequate navigation procedures, and the failure of Exxon to implement proper safety measures. Cameras captured heartbreaking scenes of thousands of seabirds and marine mammals coated in thick, black oil, struggling helplessly as their habitat turned into a toxic wasteland. Entire fisheries collapsed, local communities reliant on fishing faced economic devastation, and the fragile Arctic ecosystem suffered long-lasting damage. Even decades later, traces of oil can still be found beneath the rocky shores, a grim reminder of one of the worst environmental catastrophes in history. Before the Deepwater Horizon disaster, the 1979 Ixtoc Y oil spill was one of the most devastating environmental catastrophes in history. The disaster began when an undersea blowout at the exploratory well, operated by Pemex, Mexico's state-owned oil company, caused a massive eruption of crude oil. A critical failure in the blowout preventer allowed oil to surge uncontrollably into the Gulf of Mexico, releasing an estimated 470 million liters over nearly 10 months. Cameras captured haunting images of the once blue waters turned into a thick, black sea of crude, suffocating marine life and threatening the delicate balance of the Gulf's ecosystem. Massive oil slicks drifted for hundreds of kilometers, coating coastlines, killing thousands of fish, seabirds, and marine mammals, and crippling local fishing industries. The environmental scars lingered for decades, leaving behind a cautionary tale of how a single failure in offshore drilling could have catastrophic consequences for nature and humanity alike. The Iran-Iraq War not only claimed countless human lives, but also left behind devastating environmental destruction. One of the most catastrophic incidents occurred in 1983 when an attack ruptured the Novruz oil field in the Persian Gulf. The assault severely damaged an offshore well, causing crude oil to gush uncontrollably into the sea. In total, an estimated 260 million liters of oil spilled into the waters, turning the Gulf into a toxic wasteland. The spill poisoned marine life, suffocated coral reefs, and contaminated vast stretches of coastline. Cleanup efforts were severely hindered by the ongoing war, allowing the environmental devastation to spiral even further. Decades later, the Novruz spill remains a haunting reminder of how armed conflicts can trigger disasters far beyond the battlefield, leaving scars on both nature and humanity. In 1983, the Spanish oil tanker Castillo de Belver erupted into flames off the coast of South Africa, triggering one of the worst maritime oil spills of its time. The inferno, fueled by the massive cargo of crude oil, raged uncontrollably before the ship ultimately broke apart. As the vessel split in two, an estimated 250 million liters of oil spilled into the ocean, creating a vast, toxic slick that spread rapidly across the water. Scientists feared the worst: massive losses of marine life, long-term poisoning of delicate ecosystems, and irreversible damage to fisheries that local communities depended on. While strong ocean currents eventually carried much of the oil away from the coastline, the disaster remained a grim warning of how a single accident at sea could leave an entire ecosystem on the brink of collapse. One of the largest oil spills caused by a ship collision occurred in 1979, when the oil tankers Atlantic Empress and Aegean Captain crashed into each other off the coast of Trinidad and Tobago. The violent collision triggered massive explosions, engulfing the Atlantic Empress in flames as thick black smoke billowed into the sky. The crippled vessels leaked more than 207 million liters of crude oil into the ocean, making it one of the worst tanker spills in history. The toxic spill suffocated marine life, coating fish, birds, and coastal habitats in thick crude. Unlike many oil disasters, this one occurred far from shore, sparing coastal communities from direct contamination. However, the long-term damage to marine ecosystems was undeniable, leaving a deadly legacy beneath the surface. The tragedy served as a stark reminder of the catastrophic risks of transporting vast quantities of oil across the open seas. The sky over the Atlantic was heavy with storm clouds as the Prestige, an aging oil tanker carrying 77,000 tons of fuel, fought against the raging sea. Then, disaster struck. A crack formed along its hull, and thick, toxic oil began seeping into the water. As desperate distress calls went out, authorities scrambled to find a solution, but hesitation proved fatal. Days later, the ship broke apart and slipped beneath the waves, leaving behind a catastrophe that would haunt Europe for years. Entire coastlines drowned in black sludge, fishermen watching helplessly as their livelihoods vanished, seabirds struggling under the weight of oil-soaked feathers. The spill crippled local fisheries, caused billions in economic losses, and left environmental scars that would take decades to fade. The Prestige disaster was more than just an oil spill. It was a slow-motion nightmare, a lesson written in crude oil across the shores of Spain. March 16, 1978. The supertanker Amoco Cadiz was fighting against violent waves off the coast of Brittany, France, when disaster struck. A mechanical failure in the ship's steering system left it powerless against the raging sea. Pushed relentlessly toward the rocky shoreline, the massive vessel ran aground, splitting apart and releasing a staggering 223 million liters of crude oil into the Atlantic. What followed was an ecological catastrophe of unimaginable scale. Cameras captured haunting images. Thousands of seabirds, their feathers coated in thick, suffocating oil, flapped desperately before succumbing to the toxic sludge. Beaches turned black, once thriving marine ecosystems were smothered, and local fishermen watched in despair as their industry collapsed overnight. The Amoco Cadiz spill remains one of the worst in history, a tragic reminder that a single failure, just one broken mechanism, can unleash devastation that lasts for generations. Not all oil spills happen in an instant. Some unfold in slow motion, stretching across decades like an environmental time bomb. Since 2004, an underwater oil well owned by Taylor Energy has been leaking continuously from the ocean floor, hidden beneath the waves of the Gulf of Mexico. Unlike dramatic tanker explosions or rig blowouts, this disaster has remained largely out of sight, yet its impact is no less severe. Day after day, thousands of liters of oil seep into the water, creating toxic slicks that poison marine life and disrupt fragile ecosystems. Scientists warn that the spill, already one of the longest running in history, could continue for decades more, leaving behind an invisible catastrophe beneath the surface. While most oil spills are measured in days or weeks, the Taylor Energy leak is a haunting reminder that some disasters never truly end. The final disaster on this list is the Odyssey oil spill of 1988. The tanker split in half in the middle of the North Atlantic, unleashing 132 million liters of crude oil into the sea. Far from shore, the slick spread unchecked, poisoning marine life in ways largely unseen. A massive fire engulfed the wreckage, sending thick black smoke into the sky, sealing this disaster as one of the most devastating yet often forgotten spills in history. Every oil spill is more than just an environmental disaster. It's a stark reminder of how fragile our oceans truly are. With each catastrophe, marine ecosystems suffer, wildlife perishes, and coastal communities bear the consequences. But the real question remains, can we prevent these tragedies in the future, or are they inevitable in our pursuit of progress? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive into the world's most shocking events.